We'll now take a look at an introduction to Kantian ethics. Now, Kant distinguishes between two types of reason, and the names that he uses will seem kind of odd, but I'll explain them. The first one is what he calls theoretical reason. And normally we think of theoretical reason as, reasoning about theories. But he takes it to be this. Theoretical reason for him is reason that gives us knowledge about the world of experience. In his famous quote, "This deals with the starry heavens." In other words, less poetically, the physical world. He believed that physical bodies, planets, stars, trees, rocks, etc., are governed by scientific laws. They follow these laws. He also claims we encounter both physical objects that are purely just objects and also persons. And we experience personhood in kind of an interesting way. We experience bodies from the outside, but we experience personhood from both the outside, that's to say, other people who are, well, people, and from the inside, namely being people ourselves. So theoretical reason for him deals with the world of experience. Now, the second type of reason he talks about is what he calls practical reason. And he claims, to use another quote from Kant, is that we feel the draw, the pull of the moral law within us. This law, for him, is a governing principle, but it seems to differ from the laws that govern, physical objects, that govern tables and chairs and rocks and stars and so forth. Now, Kant does kind of his usual Kantian thing, which is, while he divides reason into theoretical and practical in this context, he claims, to quote Kant, that in the final analysis there can be about one and the same reason, which must be different only in application. Now, he wrote two major books on ethics. In 1785, there was the Foundation of the Metaphysics of Morals, and in 1787, the Critique of Practical Reason. Probably his most famous work, which wasn't about ethics, was the Critique of Pure Reason. Now, in terms of his emphasis, he placed an emphasis on duties, motives, the dignity and moral worth of people, plus he believed in an unchanging and absolute moral law. So in terms of putting Kant into our spectrum of morality, he would be an absolutist. Now, I mentioned back in the section on religion and ethics that Kant had kind of an interesting approach to the role of God in ethics. He doesn't use God as a foundation for his ethics, so he's not a divine command theorist. He doesn't say the laws are set by God, or that God's commands makes the laws good, and that what he forbids makes these things bad. Why doesn't he do this? Well, one reason is he contends that our ability to identify God with the greatest good requires a pre-existing, a priori, that is to say, based in pure reason, prior to experience, concept of moral perfection. So in order to make sense of God's being perfectly good, the greatest perfect good, we need to have a concept of morality independently of God. Secondly, in order to regard historical religious figures as good, also requires the same thing. So in other words, in order to talk meaningfully about God being good, we need an autonomous concept of morality, or so he claims. Now, one thing that Kant did that was kind of his revolutionary approach to ethics was this. He claims, contrary to our good dead friends St. Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle, he claims that morality cannot be derived from empirical facts about humans. When he talked about Thomas Aquinas, as we saw, he believed we could infer from the way humans are what humans and other things should do. Like, for example, we see that things try to avoid being killed and try to avoid surviving. And from this empirical observation, he infers a moral, law, namely that life is to be preserved. Now, a Scottish philosopher, David Hume, claimed, and didn't really argue, but mostly just claimed, that we cannot do this. We can't go from what is to what ought to be. Or so he claimed. The really seems to be lacking arguments here, but the philosophers really grabbed onto that, and it also sounds kind of cool. You can't get a ought from an is, which makes a nice bumper sticker. But Kant accepted this, but he had a bit of a problem, because on one hand, he did accept Hume's view, you can't get what we ought to do from what is, in terms of our empirical observations. But he wants to have this absolute morality. So how's he going to do it? Well, he follows a model of Copernicus. And Copernicus was the guy credited with shifting from the geocentric view, the view that the Earth is the center of everything, to the heliocentric view, the view that the Sun is the center of the aptly named solar system, as opposed to I guess it would be the geosystem. So what Kant does is reverse it. If we can't get moral principles from our experiences, extract them out of those by observation, then we have to reverse this. The mind must apply its own rational principles of morality to said experience. So, for Kant, to act morally is to act rationally, in accord with reason, which is something that Socrates and Plato would agree with, and so would Aristotle. And immorality for him is a form of irrationality. It would be not only wrong, but irrational. And so that's a brief introduction to Kantian ethics. Next, in our next section, we'll take a look at Kant's view of the good will, duty, and his central moral principle, the categorical imperative.